Hey everybody, welcome once again to another exciting installment of IncrediChat, brought to you by IncrediCon, the Hudson Valley's family-friendly comic and pop culture fest. So tonight we've got a really exciting guest here, one of my favorite people, a person who amazingly I appreciate his work when I was in high school, and now I've got to know him, and it's a pleasure to have him here with us tonight. So welcome in the amazing artist and writer of Archie Comics and co-creator of Die Kitty Die, Dan Parent. Hey, Dan.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, welcome to IncrediChat.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as you heard me say in the intro, we were talking a little bit before it. You were a part of my introduction to comic books with your work on comics.
Wow.
So, like, you were there, and I was showing you, and everybody, Jughead's Diner.
Yeah.
And it's coming out in October, right? The
October or November, yeah. They're doing the collection of it was a 7 issue. It only lasted 7 issues, so all 7 issues will be collected in a one trade. So that'll be good. It's only been reprinted in pieces over the years. It's kind of like it's such a weird series. It's sort of hard to take it out of context. So it'll be nice when it's in one package like that.
It's not the traditional Archie.
No, it was just like a real spacey comic, and I don't know. I didn't do drugs or anything, but you wouldn't know it from the series.
So I mean, and that's a good segue. So Jughead's Diner. Whereabouts were you in your Archie career, and prior to getting to Archie, really, what was your inspiration? How did you get started before getting into this world of Riverdale, if you will?
I went to the Joe Kubert School. That's where I studied, and I started at Archie when I was still in Kubert School. My third year is a 3-year school, so third year of Kubert School. Victor Gorelick at the time, who was the editor, came down and looked at our stuff, and he liked my stuff, and gave me like some one-page gags and things to work on, and I actually was starting to do those while I was in my final year.
Wow.
And then it was fortunate enough that right after graduation, a full-time position opened up at the office, up in the Archie art department. So I started working in the art department right after graduation.
Well, you've worked on so many Archie books. Do you remember what your very first Archie book was, or?
Well, I remember when my first printed piece was. It was a 1-page Sabrina gag. It was an Archie's Christmas stocking.
Oh.
I just remember it because it was like the first thing in print. The first, then that first year, I was doing a lot of stuff for like the digests, and various stories would appear in. I think my first 5-page story that I drew, that was in a book, was in Pep, when we were still doing Pep at the time. And then my first book I ever did was Veronica. We did Veronica. She had her own series where she went around the world. So Veronica #1 was my first full-length book that I was able where I drew the whole thing.
Yeah, and that was Veronica in Paris. I remember
Veronica in Paris. Yeah. And I was I actually edited that first book too. I was actually editing some books for a while, and I was editing that one, co-editing it because I was drawing it, so I couldn't be the sole editor. But I did Veronica. At that time, I came up with a whole bunch of titles at that period. Jughead's Diner was one of them. So that was another book that was one of my few earlier books there. And then we had a whole bunch of just crazy books, like we had like Faculty Funnies, which was the Archie teachers as superheroes.
Hot Dog.
I just edited. Hot Dog had his own book for a while. We had Archie 3000. Yep. Which Archie 3000 was that lasted for a few years. That was fairly successful. But really, out of all that whole cluster of books, Veronica was the one that maintained that. She had about a 210 issue run.
Oh wow!
So yeah.
And that was monumental also at that time for that character, because that was the very first time Veronica ever had her own book. Because there's Betty and Me, Betty's Diary,
right?
Regular Betty and Veronica, and when Veronica spun off onto her own thing.
Right. And I always had the idea to have Veronica in her own book, and I actually story that happened when I was in Kubert School. Michael Silverflight was on the Larry King show. He had a radio show, Larry King, right before he had his TV show. And I called in as an Archie fan, and I told him I was an artist, an aspiring artist, and I was like, why doesn't Veronica have her own comic book? And Michael Silverflight was like, well, you know, I don't know. She's just Betty's more popular. It should, you know. And so I said, you know, I think Veronica, I really played up the fact that Veronica should have her own book. So when I started at Archie, I actually reminded him years later of this phone conversation.
Oh, that's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting because Veronica is a pretty cool character. And then obviously, like you guys did in the initial run there, she was traveling all over the world. So that really led to fun stories.
Well, it was just something a little different that we could do. And it was sort of educational, but it just was fun because it was just, again, it gave the book a different twist, and the book did really well. It was really, really successful at first. We did about 20 issues where she traveled, and then they decided to bring her just into the regular Riverdale series, which I wanted to keep doing the traveling stories, but we had gotten a new editor on board, and he wanted to, for some whatever reason, he wanted to bring her to Riverdale. So
now you said at that point, I mean, and we know that there were a lot of interesting titles there, and you said you had some other ideas. Were there some other crazy Jughead Diner-ish ideas that never saw the light of day that you can tell us
about? The
other
one was Jughead's Time Police. I didn't write or draw it. I just helped kind of come up with the idea for that. Rex Lindsay drew it, and he did a really nice job on that. Then there was Explorers of the Unknown.
Yes.
Another adventure series. Rex Lindsay drew that one too. So yeah, there was probably, then we had another crazy one, Archie's RC Racers, which was like a remote control book.
I like that one because that was what they were traveling on there. It was weird that they were doing the race cars,
right?
Like the villains, and there was one long storyline.
Well, that was weird because that book, like, it never did well, if I remember correctly. But like, remote control cars were popular. They had some sort of tie-in. Some other company was like paying us as like a tie-in as we featured their cars. But I remember it was supposed to be a 12-issue series, and I think we stopped it abruptly at issue 10. Like the RC Racer race just like ended really suddenly.
Because if I remember, and I have these all down in my box, each issue was a different state. So I guess initially we do 50 issues. So
I think they didn't cover where they were supposed to cover in all 12. So in that last issue, they like covered like half the country in that last issue. It was like it was pretty strange.
You know, also now, and I know this is we're talking about some obscure Archie titles, and we can definitely get back into them in a little bit. But also at that time, through Archie, you published the Carnies.
Oh, the Carnies, yes.
Around 94.
Yep. The Carnies, yes. Bill Gollier and I created the Carnies, and the Carnies were running in backup feature in Archie and Friends. And then I think we did a couple stories in Sabrina. Like Sabrina had a couple of giant-sized specials at the time. She didn't have her own book, but she had some specials. And there was a couple of Carnies stories in there. So after doing a bunch of Carney stories, and they decided to give us a shot at a one-shot. So we did that Carney's special one-shot we did. And we wanted to do more, but I guess the sales didn't permit for us to get into a regular series. But it was okay because the Carnies have popped up through the years in other books. We've got a couple of independent books where we put them in, and then Die Kitty Die, they appeared a couple years ago. So the Carnies pop up every once in a while.
So, and I mean, and certainly like at that time period at Archie, like you would go to the rack in the grocery store or whatever when they were still having really things like that. And Archie really took up a large amount of those comic book racks at that time period. Like there were a lot of books. And like you were mentioning Pep before, like I guess they had Pep was like on a rotating schedule. Like it would be Pep one month, maybe Josie another month.
At that point, Pep and Archie's Christmas Stocking, like they were part of the Archie Giant series. Yes. Which was ironically, or strangely, I should say, was not giant size. Like the Archie Giant series were giant size back in the 70s and 60s and early 80s, but then the Giant series continued, but they were just regular size. But they just kept the name Archie Giant series. But at that point, they would take all the titles that sort of couldn't function as a regular series anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They would put them as like one-shot specials in the Giant series. So I think Pep and Laugh, Archie's Christmas Stocking, I think Little Archie,
World of Archie
series. So World of Archie, yeah. So the World of Jughead, Betty and Veronica Spectacular, Summer Fun. So those series were well. Some of those were always part of the Giant series, but like again, like something like Pep, they wanted to keep Pep going, but they couldn't keep it going as a monthly. So they would do like a Pep 1 issue or 2 issues a year for the Giant series.
Yeah. And again, same thing also with Josie, because I do want to talk about Josie because the one thing that I think you've been really good about, and Alex Simmons, our friend, we talked about this a few weeks ago on IncrediChat. Both between you and him, the diversity that the both of you have brought to Riverdale and to the Archie universe.
Right.
And I mean, I forget which one came first. I think it was Kevin Keller came first because I want to talk about Clash of the New Kids as well.
Right,
Kevin Keller. I mean, when Kevin came out, and Kevin's your creation, and certainly when he came out, you were all over the news and the media. People knew who it was. So tell us a little bit about the birth of Kevin Keller.
Well, it's been 10 years now, actually, for Kevin, and it was just you know. When John Goldwater came into the company, he had 2 previous owners who passed away a year apart. Archie, to make a long story short, was owned by like 2 companies, the Goldwaters and the Silverclays. But then Richard and Michael, the previous owners, passed away within like a year of each other. So when John Goldwater came on board, he was just a lot younger than his brother, and it was sort of like just it was open to doing more things. It was sort of like, there's not really much diversity going on here in Riverdale from what I could see. It's still sort of like, feels like it's in the 1950s a little bit too much, which I totally agreed. I had been trying to bring in more diversity for quite a while. And so John was like, do it. So we were bringing in a lot of just diverse characters. As you can see in Clash of the New Kids, we brought in a ton of new characters. And then, which was going, some of the characters were clicking and people liked. And then I texted to John, like, can we bring in a gay character? And he was like, I really can't see why not. Like, there's no reason to not have a gay character in 2010.
Yeah.
So we brought Kevin Keller in and tried to do it in a realistic, funny way. We didn't want to make it like preachy or like an after-school special.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to just have Kevin be one of the gang, and then hopefully find his place as an ongoing character, which happened. Kevin took off really well. He had his own series for a few years. And that just sort of coincided with Archie sort of getting more diverse in other ways. And then then you saw things happening like Afterlife, and all of these things sort of opened up Riverdale to a lot of people, which really led to the Riverdale TV show. There was sort of like a you could see like a path where Archie was going.
Yeah.
And the path was to sort of be not just in the 1950s soda shop.
That bubblegum feel.
Right. And which is fine. We love the Archie's bubblegum appeal, but it just needed to be part of the 21st century.
Got you. And so Clash of the New Kids, and I mean you and Alex created these characters. So I mean, and I just flipping through, Alex and I talked about like there was so many great characters like Bobby and Sherry, and I can't, and even just some of the other characters that are in here. I forget the other character's name offhand, but I believe she was based off of a real life person, the girl in the wheelchair. I can't think of her name offhand.
Harper,
because there's like a real world connection to her creation.
And Harper came later. Like actually, Harper was created about I want to say 2013 or 14. And she's based on a girl, Jewel, that I met up in Toronto. I met her at a Toronto Comic-Con, and she was a writer of children's books for disabled kids.
Okay.
And a lot of her characters were, they were they were in wheelchairs, or they had other handicapped issues that were part of the storyline. and she had like a following for writing these special books. And then when she was a big Archie fan, and she just kind of came up to me like, really, she's like, why isn't there a character in a wheelchair? And I was like, I don't know. So she was funny because she reminded me of like Veronica in a wheelchair. That's what she reminded me of. So when I created Harper, I made her Veronica's cousin in the book. And she just sort of like rivals Veronica when it comes to like shopping and fashion and all this stuff. And again, when you're doing a character who's a disability, you don't want to like pander, and you don't want to because she was in a wheelchair, we didn't want to make her like just some wallflower. Like she really has a strong personality, and even bordering on obnoxious sometimes, which is what Jewel wanted us to do. She was like, make her like me, make her like obnoxious and funny and silly and stuff. So we did, and again, I think that she was a character that kind of has stayed with Riverdale because, just because I think there was, when you create something and it's authentic and you're not trying to just create it for the sake of creating it. I think people can tell.
Cool. And we got Carrie Norris watching us, and she just said that's awesome to know Harper's origin.
Yeah, and she's based on a real character named Jewel Katz. Sadly, Jewel passed away a couple years ago, which was really unfortunate. And so that was it was very sad. Her family, of course, was shared with me how she was really happy to have made her mark in Archie Comics, which we were happy, and I was really happy to work with her. But yeah, so it was sort of like an unfortunate thing happened there with Jewel, but she'll live. Her memory lives on
through those Archie characters. And again, I mean, like you said, that Harper has become a staple in the Archie universe. And the Clash of the New Kids. I mean, Kevin was there. I don't think any of the kids from this really have popped up again. I know in some issues following this, they had some of them.
A few have popped up. The character of Shrill has popped up recently, and she's like the goth girl kind of that's in there. She got like the skunk like hair. Yeah, that's Shrill. Yeah, so she's popped up in the last few years. Yeah. So, but we put in so many characters in there, and then we just. People Shrill got sort of a reaction, and so we used her.
Yeah. Now let me just ask you, as you and Alex, and because this is a great collaboration of two great minds, designing these new characters that were coming to Riverdale from this other high school. What was the design process like? Like, did he, hey, I want to do this character, or did you say, hey, I want to do, and
he just sort of like explained the character, and then I would just do some sketches and send them in. And the Archie people, the editors would look at it and say what they liked and what they didn't like. But it was a pretty smooth approval process because, again, we did a lot of characters for that series, the New Kids. So
yeah,
that was fun because it just was fun just designing all of these new characters.
Yeah, and again, like you said, some of them took, some of them didn't take, and that's with really anything.
Well, it was nice as drawing characters who, first of all, had different ethnicities.
Yes,
and also we were drawing characters that were different, like body size, body shapes. Some characters were, heavier than other characters. Some were shorter, and some were skinny. Right. So right there you go. So we were trying to just do things that you hadn't seen before.
Yeah,
because pretty much everybody. All the Riverdale characters before pretty much followed the same body type,
exactly,
facial structure,
and I mean, and just to go quickly back about like some of your inspirations for this, your style is very, very similar to Dan DeCarlo. Was he one of your major inspirations?
Yes,
and as you continue now, still with Archie, really trying to keep, because he really defined that traditional Archie look.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he was the one who I grew up admiring. Like even when I was a kid and I collected Archie comics and I was really getting into drawing, wanting to get into comics, I didn't even know his name because they didn't put Dan's name on the books at that time. But I remember just thinking, this is like, I always called him the good Archie artist because he was like so good. And he always did the covers and the Betty and Veronica stuff. So I just sort of like just always would look for his stuff. And then when I was in Kubert schools, or even before that, like the early '80s, they started to, and I knew who he was by name, and then I really started following his stuff when I was in a Kubert school. And then when I started at Archie, I was able to work with Dan, and that was great because he was looking to slow down at the time. So what he was doing was, in some of our early '90s stuff, he would just lay out his stories, and I would finish the pencils. So you'll see a lot of like the old Betty and Veronica Spectacular stuff where they'll say like, pencils, Dan DiCarlo and Dan Parent. Those were all the stories I finished. And I really learned a lot about layout and how to draw like anatomy. My anatomy got a lot better.
Gotcha.
So, if I had that in Kubert school, then I really would have improved fast, because when you're just drawing over someone like Dan DiCarlo, you just can't help but, learn so much.
Now let me ask you, as you were drawing over his artwork, I've heard stories. I don't know if you can mention or not, but on occasion, Dan would slip some jokes in there that the people that were the inking or going over his artwork would have to complete or fix up.
Oh, he was always drawing like naked stuff all the time. Oh, yeah. He was doing it all the time. The one who did it a lot was Sam Schwartz. Used to do it a lot. I mean, Sam Schwartz passed away in the '90s, so I didn't see much of his artwork that came in. But Sam Schwartz would always like draw stuff on the back of the pages. Like he'd lightbox it, but like he'd draw like a Veronica or a Betty, but they would be obviously not wearing much or nothing at all on the other side. Or they would just do like stupid gags and stuff, like kind of like vulgar stuff. They would just do like bathroom humor kind of stuff. But they would definitely do some of his like dirty drawings. And then of course, Dan also did a lot of risque stuff on the side.
Yeah. But it's just funny.
And then he did a lot of those girly drawings in those 50s and 60s magazines, men's magazines. I mean, they were like not really nude, but they were about as close as you could get to being naked.
Gotcha. I mean, and his artwork really, I mean, other than you, like, I mean, his artwork really inspired a lot of the folks at Archie. But then you even look at somebody like Bruce Timm, who was very much inspired by Dan's artwork. So,
yeah.
So,
I mean, he just was, Dan was always just, and then when I started at Archie, at that time they would always tell everybody, draw like Dan DiCarlo, draw like Dan DiCarlo. So it was a little intimidating because we all want to draw like Dan DiCarlo. But if you try and draw too much like Dan, it sort of stifle your creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So once I started drawing over Dan's stuff, it took me a couple more years after that to really get comfortable with my style. Like I really wasn't comfortable with my style the first like 10 years I was there. Then I just started to sort of like get loosen up and not worry about it so much. And also the powers that be at Archie let me have more freedom. And then I started to able sort of form my own style after a while. But it definitely took me a long time to get the style that I wanted.
Mm-hmm. But like you're saying, everybody really does bring their own little like twist to it. Like, you have your style, like you mentioned Rex Lindsay. They were like, I remember one of the things I remember about Rex Lindsay's Archie, like he like Dan and you would have like Archie's hair would just be like, like cropped at the back, but Rex Lindsay often like Archie had like a little bit of hair coming.
Rex was into the mullets.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Is either Archie 3000, which I drew with Rex. We thought we were making him look so futuristic, but you just had this ridiculous looking mullet. Like
it was more spiky.
It was like a spiky mullet. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, certainly as we're sitting here talking about Dan too, because Dan created Josie. Josie was based off of his wife, and I mean, what an evolution that character has had. We could talk about that in a minute, but certainly, once again, breaking barriers in Riverdale, you had that relationship with not Josie but Valerie. Valerie and Archie. And how did that come about? Because I'm sure some of those wholesome initial fans of Archie were like, whoa.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm trying to think, like with Kevin Keller, there was backlash, but it was from the people you would predict it would be, mostly like religious groups and stuff.
Yeah.
But nothing, well, I won't say there weren't some I did get a few nasty phone calls, I will admit, but I never was confronted face to face. I was confronted face to face over the Archie Valerie thing at a convention.
You were.
Some guy came up to me, and he because you're the artist on this. I go, yeah. This was, and it was in the South. I'm not judging the South entirely, but it was in the South. And he goes to me, he goes, I know you have an agenda, and I don't like it. Like, it was like pointing his finger at me. So what's my agenda? Like, diversity is my agenda. Okay, I'll take it. But yeah, there was like some backlash. But again, the story formed just organically because the story started out where it was going to be Archie and Josie. We were going to do a story where Archie and Josie were going to have a romance, and I just was like, this is so boring. So you got two redheaded teenagers, or not? Well, Veronica's, Josie's older, but I just wasn't feeling it. Just wasn't not feeling the chemistry between the two of them. And I was like, well, what about Valerie? Because Valerie is really smart, and she's just sort of like more of an opposite of Archie, just because I don't know. I always had the impression that Valerie and that's the way we wrote the story. Valerie could sort of like put Archie in his place where Betty and Veronica couldn't. I don't know. And then it's just and then Valerie was like a songwriter, and I don't know. When we were presenting the idea again, John was like, "Yeah, that sounds good. I think we haven't also explored a lot about Valerie too." So when I was writing the story just like wrote itself. Like, it just like was like the fastest story I ever wrote. I think I like wrote the whole story like in a day. Like the whole book. It just flowed naturally, and it wasn't like I was like intentionally trying. The diversity angle, of course, was important, but it wasn't like the whole factor. But then when I started drawing them together, they just looked really like hot together. They just looked really like they had like a sexual sort of like energy. It was really fun. So yeah, again, it wasn't like planned. It just sort of happened, and that romance is we've gone back to it several times.
Yeah.
Then we did like a storyline where one of the imaginary stories where they got married too, and that was fun.
And they had the little girl. I remember.
The little girl, yes.
And I mean, again, like your inspiration. You mentioned Kevin before. Kevin and that storyline with Valerie. All translated over to Riverdale.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, when you really, I mean, certainly all the folks at Archie Comics really have contributed to what goes on Riverdale. But certainly, like there's a heavy Dan Parent influence over at Riverdale.
Well, I hope so. I've seen some storylines we've done, and then the other minor characters we've created. Like Jelly Bean, we created Jughead's sister Jelly Bean back in the 90s. Again, that came about when we were all talking about how it was weird that all the characters were only children, and only Betty had siblings.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, who could we give a sibling to? Which is Jughead. So we just came up with the whole Jelly Bean storyline, and Jelly Bean's made it to Riverdale. She's older in Riverdale. She's like 12 years old. In the comic books, Jelly Bean is still a toddler, or like 2-3 years old.
And since we're talking about Riverdale, I mean, as somebody who's worked with these characters for like 30 years, and Carrie wrote here, Archie and Valerie are my favorite storyline. I like that storyline too. What are your thoughts as working with the classic? And I mean, you still do the classic Archie stories, and then you did your pal Archie.
I did Your Pal Archie, which was still classic Archie. We just drew it in a little bit more of a modern style to like kind of like make it look a little more like Riverdale.
Yeah.
But it was still classic, and I still like right now I'm working on classic Archie, and that's definitely my forte is the classic. As much as I like to make it modernize it and bring new elements to it, I just for me the classic is my thing.
I mean, because it's really interesting because Archie is one of those things that really spans generations. Like your grandparents, your parents, your children know these characters.
I mean, 80 years means your grandparents and great grandparents could have grown up with Archie.
And I mean, now that grandparents are watching, and I'm sure some grandparents' mouths are dropping as they're watching Riverdale with their kids. But
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure a few, yeah, I'm sure a few. There's been some shock there for sure,
but like one of the storylines, and this is even going back to the whole Valerie thing that I really like is at first I'm a big Josie fan, and the way that they switched up the characters of Josie and the Pussycats, like it really is. It's a nice new way to do it, you know. And like, I feel like those characters, like again, those are characters that come and go. Like obviously, it was the Josie book back when it first came out from Dan, you know. Then in the '60s, late '60s, early '70s, became the cartoon,
right?
You know. And then they disappeared for a bit, like, and they were doing like the Archie Giant series, like once a year kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the movie came out, and there was a little resurgence for the movie, and people love the movie. I think the movie's a lot of fun.
I love the movie, and I remember at the time the movie did not do well.
No.
But it has a real cult following. Like
yeah.
It really has a lot of people really you know, they love the movie, and then the soundtrack is really good too.
I just picked it up on vinyl.
Yeah, I have the vinyl too.
The purple with the spot.
I have the vinyl too. Yeah.
Yep. And then like they disappear again, and they come and go, and now I'm curious to see what they're now going to do with Josie and all those characters from Katie Keene, because unfortunately that show had been canceled.
Right.
So
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't really heard. I know that they were hoping that maybe another network would pick up Katie Keene, but I'm not really sure. I don't know. I don't have the inner scoop on if Josie's coming back to Riverdale or not. So I'm not sure.
You know, and I mean, outside of Josie on Katie Keene, I think again, a drastic change from the comic books, but the character of Ginger Lopez.
Yes.
Like, what they did with her, like that was the change. And again, hitting very, very big social issues that are going on right now in our world.
Right. Yeah, Ginger Lopez, I created her in around 1998, 99. She was sort of a replacement for Cheryl Blossom.
Gotcha.
Cheryl Blossom had left the Archie world for a while, so she was sort of the interim Cheryl.
And Cheryl Blossom has her own story on Riverdale. It's an interesting show for Archie fans.
Oh yeah.
So, but like going back to the classic Archie, so there is still a lot of classic Archie that's going on. Because I definitely want to get into Kitty in a minute, but let's just finish up with Archie. So I think one of the big books that you guys have done in the recent years was Batman and Archie.
Yeah.
And you're doing the B-52s and Archie. There was Archie and the Ramones. So how does some of these crossovers, these partnerships with these characters or these musicians or personalities, how do those happen? Sharknado.
I mean, most of these things just happen randomly. Like Sharknado, for example, I had met the producers of Sharknado at Comic-Con, and I did a commission for them with Archie versus Sharknado, just like a sketch. And then we put it on Twitter and got a lot of likes and follows. And so we were like, that'd be great if we could do an Archie Sharknado book. And Mike Pellerito was really into it because he likes Sharknado too. And then John Goldwater was like, what is Sharknado? Like, what is this? Like, is this really a thing? And then he saw how there had been several Sharknados and how there was a huge following for Sharknado. So he was like, okay, let's do it. And then we did it, and it was it basically sold out. You can hardly even find copies of that book anymore. Then the other ones, like Archie versus Predator, was sort of like
Fernando.
It was an Archie meeting, and someone just brought it up, and then they called Dark Horse, and then that was set.
Archie and Kiss.
Same thing with Kiss. Well, Kiss, like John Goldwater knows Gene Simmons, so basically it was just like a friendly deal. Like, can we do Kiss? And they're like, sure. And then it was Batman '66 was that started where I had met with Steve Orlando and I had pitched it. We wanted to work together. We were going to do a Kevin series that didn't happen, and I ended up doing that by myself. And then we were like, let's do something else. And we thought Batman '66. So we presented it to Archie and DC. And then it took about 2 or 3 years to actually happen. And Steve had to go on. Steve was, writing 500 things. He was like a superstar at DC. Yeah. So he has committed to some other projects. And so they just went through different writers. Different writers were going to write it. And then it ended up with Jeff Parker, who was writing the actual comic book, Batman 66 comic. And then it finally happened, you know, after a couple of years of going back and forth. And that was so much fun. That was probably like the best project I ever worked on, I think.
Now, let me ask you, I know because you do a lot of cons, while you were developing this, I'm not sure of the timing, but did you ever have a chance to show Adam West in your travels? I'm sure you guys were at some shows similar. Did he ever get to see any of the art?
But he had passed before the book was, we were working on the book.
Gotcha.
So I never got to, I had met him before because I was at a show with my son like 10 years ago, and my son wanted a picture with him and an autograph. So we did that. But as far as the Archie Batman series, it was too late to show him that, which would have been fun. I would have loved to have shown him that.
Well, again, you know, just thinking about it, and I have the book, I didn't pull it, but another celebrity who I know you love, George Takei.
Oh, of course, George Takei is the best. And yeah, we have featured him as a guest star in Kevin Keller, and then we did like a store signing.
Yes.
And with George Takei, and he's, you know, like the nicest guy you ever want to meet. He's you know, when you really see him on TV shows and talk shows, he appears to be really nice,
genuine,
and he is that nice. So that was definitely a thrill to be able to work with a legend like him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been lucky to work with some cool people. The B-52s last year, we did a team up with them.
Yep.
That just was a random thing. Because we've been doing some music ones. We had done the Archie and the Ramones. Mm. And then in the Archie series, we did a few other team ups like Blondie and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
And I just on Facebook, I had mentioned I was friends with Fred Schneider on Facebook, and I just said, "Would you want to do like a team up with Archie?" And he put his manager in contact with Archie, and then a couple of weeks later, that was a deal.
Jeez, magic.
And so we just did, you know, and then I was able to meet them at one of their concerts and just kind of talk to them, and a few months later, the book came out.
Wow.
So you just don't know. You don't know. You never know what's going to come down the pike.
And I mean, in all honesty, too, like you said, Archie's been around for 80 years, so they can virtually meet anybody at this point now.
I mean, when you look at what we've done in the history of Archie, there's been Little Archie.
Yeah.
There's been Archie 3000. There's been Archie 1, where they're cavemen.
Yeah.
There's been Explorers of the Unknown, or the Adventure people. You know, there's just you know, there was the new Archies back in the 80s where they were like 12. I mean, I don't think there hasn't been many avenues we haven't tapped.
Senior citizen Archie.
That's probably the one we haven't. But.
I haven't gotten there yet. So now moving on from Archie. So you and Fernando Ruiz, and you mentioned the Hubert School, and I know Fernando is an instructor there, but you guys came up with Kitty Raven.
Yes.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about Kitty.
Kitty, well, she is a comic book character in the storyline. But in the story, our story is based in the comic book world. So the comic book world is actually part of the real world. And Kitty is a long-running comic book character who's really successful, but she finds that her sales are just not good. Like which, you know, is kind of a reality that's kind of happening in the comic book world. Sometimes you see, like, comic books aren't the sellers that they were like 30, 40 years ago. So anyway, the publisher is like, what are we going to do with Kitty? Like, her sales stink. So they're like, well, you know, if we kill her off, we can like generate some sales. So they're like, all right. So like, but they can't just kill her off the way we would do it in a regular comic book way now, because she's actually real in the story. So they actually try and recruit other comic book characters to try and kill her off. So, and then in the Kitty publishing world, there's a whole new roster of characters we've created. So we have like different characters that are hired by the publisher to kill her. So that's kind of where the premise begins. And so we just, in the first issue, we just see all these different characters, or all different ways they're trying to kill her. Mm-hmm. Then in the second issue, the second series was Die Kitty Die, Hollywood or Bust. And that was set in the world where they're going to make a movie about Kitty. Mm. So in this series, someone's trying to kill her, but we don't know who's trying to kill her. So we've kind of created like a mystery of who is trying to kill her. And then we were fortunate enough to do a third series, which is Die Kitty, Die Heaven and Hell, where Kitty actually gets killed. And then she goes to heaven and she goes to hell and has to figure out how to navigate the afterlife. And she does. And so then we did another series this year, which we're currently working on, which is Die Kitty, Die Starstruck, which is Kitty in outer space.
Nice.
This is the end of Die Kitty, Die Heaven and Hell. She gets abducted by aliens, or we find out people from her past. And again, even these people in these outer space people that she deals with are still characters from her old comic book adventures in the Kitty universe. So as we are continuing the Kitty series, we're creating characters that she has known in her fake history that we're just sort of like also creating at the same time. So
I do want to mention it, and because I know you're a fan too. I mean, Kitty has there's a very much an Archie feel to it, but also the Harvey characters.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very obvious how influenced by Harvey comics we are, because our other main characters are Dippy the Ghost, which is, like another very famous ghost, a little like one named Casper. And then we would have Little Satan, which is like sort of like a Hot Stuff parody. Yeah.
There they are.
Yep. So yeah, we just, the thing with Die Kitty Die is we just go back into the comics that we loved growing up, and we just sort of like borrow and mostly pay homage to things that we like. Like you'll see in Die Kitty, Die Starstruck, where there's a lot of outer space stuff in there. And so we also doing homages to like our superhero things we like too, like Silver Surfer, and just changing them up and making them our own. Just making these like very they're not that similar at all, but you can tell that there's like little tributes to things that we like. And the main thing with it is that we really just want to make people laugh and make it funny. That's really the whole gist of Kitty. It's just something that's like funny and lighthearted that people will enjoy, that they'll want to come back to, and we don't want to hit anybody over the head with anything too serious with Kitty.
Yeah. Now let me just ask. I mean, obviously, I'm not revealing too much. I'm assuming you guys would probably leave Starstruck open-ended once again for fifth Kitty event.
We have quite a cliffhanger at the end of this one.
Okay.
We have it's the cliffhangerest cliffhanger we've had. Yeah. So we're we're actually working on issue 4. See, what we do is, for people that aren't familiar, it's usually 4 issues that we do, and then we put those 4 issues into a trade or graphic novel. So right now we're on the 4th issue. We'll be finishing that up soon, and then we will put out the trade, which we fund this through Kickstarter. So all the Kickstarter fans will be getting their hardcover later this fall. And we also did and then we also have a couple like one-shot specials. We're funding our Kickstarter. One is Jeddah, which is like a public domain character that Dan DiCarlo created, but that is public domain, so we can sort of do what we want, do our take on Jeddah. So we're going to do an issue of that. Kickstarter is like a whole other adventure. We wanted to do exactly what we wanted. So Kickstarter is the perfect venue for that. You can do, it's your baby. So you either sink or swim.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have like far beyond swam with that, because like when you post these things up now, like they are very quickly fulfilled.
Yeah, this time we funded it in, I want to say like 4 or 5 days. This time. We actually had our most successful Kickstarter during the pandemic, which was, we weren't really sure how it was going to go. We just knew that, okay, well, now we're home during the pandemic, and there's no convention, so we may as well do our Kickstarter because we're home. But I was really expecting in my head, I was like, if we do maybe half what we normally do or 2/3, I'll be happy with that because, people are probably not focused on Kickstarters.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff going on. People are out of work. But for whatever reason, because people were stuck home, I think we had a lot more of a captive audience. And
it's also a nice escape too.
It's a nice escape. Plus, a lot of times, comic shops weren't open.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of new comics coming out, so people were able to sort of focus on this. And we also had it done. We had a 2-year gap between the last Kitty book. Mm-hmm. We were doing them every year, so I think that 2-year gap maybe made people a little hungrier for some more Kitty stuff. Mm-hmm. But either way, we funded it. We had our best Kickstarter, so it's nice because then we're able to fulfill it. We're able to add more of the extras that like these one-shot issues and specials, and so it was really a nice bonus for this year.
Yeah. Now, as you said, you're doing like a lot. There are in the books there are a lot of flashbacks and like her old co-star, her comic co-stars. Have you guys thought about doing maybe like a collection of like classic Kitty stories of what?
Oh, we are doing that actually, because one of the one shots that we funded is called Kitty's Classic Adventures. So that's going to be we're going to take the best of the retro stories, mm-hmm. and then we're going to put a new retro story in there.
Oh, very nice.
And that's going to be one of the one shots that's coming out. The other one shot is there's that one. There's the Jetta book.
I remember that.
And then there's going to be one called Kitty's Fashion Show. So there's going to be a bunch of like fashions and one pinups and that kind of stuff.
Kind of like the classic like Archie pinup pages.
Right, fashion pages. So yeah, so that'll be the 3 one-shots that we do after we get this the hardcover wrapped up, which we're right down the wire on that. But it's we're getting there.
Have you guys looked into doing maybe some animation with Kitty? Has that been discussed?
It's been discussed. We actually did meet with some people in Canada last year. Mm-hmm. We're still sort of like talking to. There's another person we're talking to. So I would love to, as I think that the series lends itself to. I think it lends itself to actually either animation or like a mix of animation and real life. Because we have real life characters who are like publishers and stuff, and then we have the comic book characters. So I think it would be sort of like a nice hybrid of the two.
That would be neat.
So yeah, I mean, I assume that would be cheap to produce, but that's not my problem. Someone else.
As you're mentioning, like this hybrid thing, a couple of weeks ago, I had Gary Wolf on who wrote Roger Rabbit, and I had the Hollywood or Bust, and that's a very Jessica Rabbit look she's wearing in the front there.
Right.
Yeah,
So who knows? I definitely once we get this next series out, that's something I really want to like pursue. Is trying to get back into talking about an animation deal.
Because I mean, even something like that would be great, like on like a Netflix or
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That'd be a good place. So we just have a couple of comments and questions here. Joe Ryan. He just says classic Archie is one of my greatest influences. Joe Ryan's an inspiring artist, so yeah.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Yeah, it's one of my great influences too. Again, you can't beat the classic.
And then Scott Shurl here. And I guess I don't know if they actually did a space Archie. He said, "Is there an Archie in space? There should be. I know there's Archie 3000. Did they do a space?"
Well, there was Archie 3000. But there was a series of Archie stories in space back in Life with Archie back in the 70s.
Okay.
They were sort of like Star Trek-ish stories where they were just having adventures in outer space. So they have done it. They've never done it as a series. Like a couple years ago, they did a one-shot Archie where he was in space, and I remember Giselle Delagasse, who's a really good artist. She did the cover for that book. But not a series.
Interesting. Maybe that could be something coming up.
Hey, you never know.
We have a question from Joe Ryan now too. He says, "I have a question for Dan. What is your advice for a person breaking into the industry, creating a crowdfunding campaign for either Kickstarter or Indiegogo? Anything would be most appreciated."
Oh, okay. Well, breaking into the industry. Let's see. Well, crowdfunding, it's not easy. It helps if you like do have like a background or you've been in the business for a while. Like when I did it, people knew who I was, so I was able to have some fans who like were on board with the project. But even if you don't have that following and you're just starting something new, I'd say the best thing is to make sure you have a lot of art done and the storyline done. Like don't just like go up to Kickstarter with an idea. Make sure you have like, you know, say if it's 3 or 4 issues, make sure you have an issue done. Make sure you have it all mapped out. Make sure you have something ready, because if it gets funded, you have to produce it. And one of the things that goes wrong with Kickstarters is a lot of people, they launch a project and they say it's going to be ready in like 6 months, and it's not ready for 6 years because other things come up and they didn't have enough of it planned out. Life happens. So you really have to make sure you're committed to producing that book. But again, my main number one thing would be have your project planned out and have a good portion of it done, so that you can show this in your project plan.
And I guess like you're saying too, is while the campaign is going on, you're showing the progression too, right?
Yeah, like as we're doing it, like we're showing, like, you know, like we're working on covers and stuff while we're doing it, and working on you know, sketches and, you know, and even working on like commissions for people while we're doing it. Like somebody might want like a pinup or something. So people like to see things in progress. People like to see new stuff. So when we're posting our new covers and new pinups, and it just makes the project more interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what you guys do. As you said, you really do them as 4 issues and then put them into a trade. But like even as you complete them, you do you know, one of the things that people can purchase is they'll get the issues as they are being released. So you guys release them.
Well, what we do is each issue as we do it is released digitally. Yeah. So like in fact, you know, number 1 and 2 are up of the last series. Number 3 will be done this weekend. So number 3 will go up this weekend. Then we're going to be working on number 4 pretty quickly, because we have to get to the printers in the next couple of months, get it all done so we could sit. So we need to do that. But yeah, people can read the issues as they go along. And then sometimes, like we were with another Chapter House last year, another company, and they were actually taking the single issues and putting them in comic shops. Yeah. So that was outside of what we do. So right now we focus on digital to a print trade. But yeah, the single issues we do, the 3 other single issues we're going to do with this are going to be printed though.
Okay, I have a question from here, the watch party here. They want to know what is, and I guess we'll even throw this in for Kitty. What would be a dream Archie or Kitty project that you would like to work on?
Well, let me see. I mean, with Archie, I've worked on, I've pretty much worked on every character. I would like to do something more with Sabrina. Like I've done Sabrina before. I would like to do another Sabrina series. I would also like to do a couple team ups. I wanted to do. I like to do Archie and Superman.
Oh, that would be interesting.
That'd be a fun team up to do. There's a few. I'd like to do more musical ones too. I want to do like Archie and Weezer. I'd like to do. That'd be cool. Whether that'll happen, I mean, I'm just throwing these things out there. I've brought this up before, but
you never know who's watching, right?
yeah, you never know. Yeah, I mean, like you said, you just don't know. I mean, we had started before the pandemic. We had started Archie meets Flash Gordon before the pandemic.
Oh wow!
So that's still in limbo. I mean, I imagine we'll finish it at some point, but that just got sidetracked with all the pandemic stuff.
Let me ask, with Flash Gordon, is there any version of Flash? Like, are you meeting Sam Jones Flash Gordon, or?
Well, there is the cover was released, because we did solicit the cover, so the cover is online. It was not Sam Jones so much. It was like Dynamite did a series a couple years ago of Flash Gordon, and we kind of followed that style. And Jeff Parker, who wrote Archie 66, was writing the script. So we're following that sort of like that style. Gotcha. And the characters were the Archie characters. The story is set in the 50s. So the Archie characters are drawing them like they were drawn in the 1950s.
It's kind of like how Batman 66 was.
Right, except that was the 60s, right? So, so hopefully, you know, like again, everything got sidetracked this year. So hopefully we'll jump back on that. Hopefully next year.
Excellent, cool. And then for Kitty, any dream projects? I mean, you guys are doing what you want with Kitty, right?
Yeah, Kitty, we do what we want with. There's just, you know, we can do whatever. I would just let Kitty. I wouldn't even mind doing like, well, I would like, again, I think something, an animation would be nice.
Yeah,
I'd like to take it up to that step. The one thing we did with Kitty last year that was something we wanted to do is we did a Kitty figure, a statue. Okay. Which was a lot of fun. It was part of our Kickstarter. It was a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think I got it right here. Yeah, this is our Kitty. If I can get it in here, our Kitty figurine.
Hold on, let me give you the brand name.
There we go. So yeah, it was a lot of fun working and trying to get a statue done. But it was a ridiculous amount of work because we had to do it overseas with China. And then we had to have sort of like an interpreter work for us, and came into like more expenses than we thought it was going to cost. Like shipping was really high. So I'm glad we did it. I've always wanted to do one, and maybe we'll do another one someday, but not for a while.
Now let me just ask, thinking animation wise, if you had to cast Kitty, who would you like to see doing the voice of her, or even portraying her in real life?
Kitty is loosely based on remember Christina Hendricks on Mad Men?
That's who I was thinking.
She was who we had in mind when we were creating Kitty, and you know, so she also has a very sexy voice. So she might be a good kitty voice, and so she definitely is she was definitely the inspiration for her because on Mad Men she sort of like just has like a classic look.
Mm-hmm.
You could just that was just sort of like work in any sort of like time frame or so.
And she was on Firefly too. She had like that sex.
She was on Firefly, yeah.
She had like that very sexy presence. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, and plus she also has like a figure that's like sort of classic.
Yeah.
She has like that Marilyn Monroe, that curvy figure. So which is what we wanted to do with Kitty. So.
Gotcha. And then just before we wrap up here, outside of the Flash Gordon thing that's in limbo right now and finishing up Kitty, are there any other projects like during this quarantine that we should be looking out for that you're working on?
Right now, it's not really. I mean, finally, I was also working on Betty and Veronica meet Vampirella and Red Sonja.
Yes.
I was doing covers for that, and I did an issue. That just came out a couple weeks ago because, again, with quarantine, that got backed up a few months. So that was another thing. Right now, I'm working on writing 5-page stories. I just finished some Christmas. I'm working on some Christmas stories right now, drawing those, and working on covers, and I'm working on some Archie 80th anniversary stuff for next year.
Oh.
Doing a couple special books for Archie's 80th anniversary. But really, between just working on that and then just finishing this Kitty series right now are the things I'm working on, and a couple other things percolating, but we'll see how they go with everything getting back to normal.
Stay tuned, right? I mean, and that's gonna be cool. Like you mentioned, 80th anniversary. There's gonna be a lot of Archie stuff out there then, I'm sure.
Yeah, 80 years. Yeah, it's crazy.
So cool. And then on the bottom here, for anybody that wants to follow Dan, Twitter, you can follow him at Parent Daniel, and then all the Kitty books, and I guess some of your other books are available at danparent.com.
You go to danparent.com. Also, you go to diekitty.com. We've got our Kitty store there. My website, danparent.com, has got like a lot of just my a portfolio of all my Archie stuff and links to other things. And then, on Instagram, I'm also at Parent Daniel. I'm always posting, whatever I'm working on, including like whenever I do commissions, I post my commissions there.
Yeah, and I guess they can contact you through any of those means to do commissions if people are
Yeah, I do commissions through there, and also on the Archie website, I'm doing Archie-fied versions of people and Archie character sketches too. So you can even go to the Archie website, and there's like a little explanation there, and you can order them through the Archie website too.
Awesome. All right, cool. So once again, Dan, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everybody who participated. Joe Ryan said solid advice. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Aaron just was saying Archie 3000. Maybe there's a space story in there. So everybody that tuned in tonight, thank you again for joining us. I'll just give a quick teaser for next week. Next week, I have one of the members of the new Mickey Mouse Club from the 90s, Tasha Danner. We're going to be talking about, they have a Christmas album that's coming out. And you'll enjoy who our guests will be the following week, Dan. We're going to have Fernando Ruiz in here on the 7th.
Yeah.
So, so we'll be talking more Archie and Die Kitty Die that week too. So yeah, check out Dan's website, and we will see you soon here on IncrediChat. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.